is Kat Carley, and I'm the admissions director at Gulf Breeze Recovery. It is a non-12-step treatment center in Gulf Breeze, Florida.
And my name's Barnett Gilmer, and I'm the owner-CEO of Gulf Breeze Recovery. This is a first of a series of podcasts that we're doing. We titled it Beyond Addiction. And this series is about the genesis of addiction, and how it really gets started. And we're kind of looking at this on a perspective that a lot of times is overlooked. And it's a perspective that really focuses in on the innocence of how addiction gets started in the first place.
So I'm going to reference this picture of a plant here behind me to kind of explain a little bit about what it is that we're talking about today. What you see above the surface here, everything above the soil, is the observable behavior of addiction. It's what is above the surface. It is the actual using, it is the scheming, manipulating, finding ways and means to get more. These little offshoots here, the roots, are the root cause, the precursors to addiction, the things that precede the observable behavior. Sometimes things like low self-esteem, getting prescribed something that's habit forming by a physician, mental health problems, any number of things can be precursors to this observable behavior. But what we're going to focus on today is the common element between any observable addiction, and that's the soil. That is what has to be present in order to create a really fertile environment that allows addiction to really burst forth and become this bigger problem.
Yeah, the fertile soil that helps create addiction in the first place is what we'd like to call the outside-in misunderstanding of where our happiness comes from. And what I mean by that is that, we've been brought up as a society, through consumerism, maybe as a child, commercials, telling us that how much more fun our life would be, how much greater our life would be if we just had this toy. And so that we kind of grow up with that. Okay, now this is on a subconscious level, and this is one aspect of looking at this. But we are conditioned, if you will, to believe that things on the outside of us will create a better feeling, will create happiness. Okay, so we grow up believing this, and our toys get bigger, obviously, maybe a car or whatever. And the thing about it, the illusionary part of it is that it does create a temporary good feeling, if you will. But, kind of like a car, that kind of goes away after the first car payment, But there is something temporary, but it never is lasting. It's always fleeting, and we're always looking for the next thing. Well, when a person is looking outside themselves for a good feeling, then a lot of times they may turn to a drug, whether it be a gateway drug such as, marijuana or drinking, alcohol. But they actually find a solution. There is a solution there. Albeit temporary. And so they keep going back to the drug, searching for that solution. But it all begins, this fertile soil. What makes this soil fertile is the outside-in misunderstanding of where happiness comes from and searching for that.
So yeah, the consumerism, I think, is a common place that most of this starts, this feeling that something out there is responsible for my experience in here. And when I get that thing that I think is going to make me feel better in here, and the feeling in here doesn't last, when I really believe that feeling is accessible out there, I think I just didn't get enough. I just didn't do enough. It's actually the next thing. I need a better car. I need more of the drug. I need the next new toy. And I think that what can be really tricky too is there are a lot of people out there going, I'm not materialistic. I don't need the next big car. This doesn't apply to me. But what we're talking about is not specific to consumerism. It's anything outside of yourself that you are attributing responsibility for feelings inside of yourself. So it can be, going back to childhood, like you were talking about, it can be the attaboy from the parents, that you got good grades or won a basketball game, and the people in your family said, that's awesome, you're a great kid, you're doing it right, and you got that temporary good feeling of validation. That's something outside of ourselves that we can't control, that we are always seeking that next thing. The next promotion, the next accomplishment, the next achievement, the next thing that's happening out there that we think is responsible for our feelings in here. Because that is not where feelings come from. It's never going to be sustainable. It's never going to be enough. There's always going to be the next thing. There's always going to be the next thing. And when we talk about that in relation to drugs, the progression of addiction just makes perfect sense, because I used that drug and I got a good feeling. So I know it works, but it didn't last. So maybe I didn't use enough. Maybe next time instead of 1 pill, I need 2 pills. Maybe next time instead of 2 pills, I need 3 pills. Maybe next time instead of pills, I need to try a different route of administration. And this is all subconscious. No one sits down and writes in their journal, I am seeking this feeling from this thing, and today I did X amount, and tomorrow I'll need to do more. It's something that we do without even thinking twice about it, and that's why it's so subversive and so sneaky. We don't even realize sometimes that we're looking out there to make things better in here. But at the end of the day, all we're seeking is happiness.
Kat, it's funny when you say that, about, accomplishments, that kind of thing, not just the purchasing of goods or whatever. I think back when I graduated from college, and it was so funny because I had this mindset that, once I graduated, once I've got that degree, things are going to be so much better. And I was going to be happy. That's what I needed. And I remember the feeling of elation when I finished my last final exam, and the weight off my shoulders and that kind of stuff. And there was that good feeling associated. No ifs, ands, and buts. But I distinctly remember, 2 weeks later going, wow, is that all there is? And so, it is the same thing when we talk about any kind of thing that we're looking outside ourselves, for happiness. And so it's not even just the genesis of alcohol or drug addiction, but of all addictions, okay? And it's just a host of them, whether, gambling, shopping, sex, whatever it is. So really, we could talk about, that search for serenity, that search for peace, that search for happiness. But we're just doing it in the wrong place. And so that's the innocent part of what goes on with a person. Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, I think I'm going to be an addict. It sneaks up on them.
So right, Barnett, it's innocent, and addiction is formed when a person reaches for that substance and they get the good feeling, they get that temporary good feeling that they've been searching for, and they keep coming back to it again and again, and they confuse it for a solution. Addiction is not the problem. It is the person's misguided but purely innocent attempt at a solution, as an attempt to find peace, happiness, serenity. And what happens as the progression of addiction continues is that there is a physical component where when the person who's using keeps returning to the substance again and again and again as the solution, because it's now the best solution that they have or that they know of, the body becomes physically dependent on it. So there are actual physical components where if the person doesn't get the substance in the quantity that they've become accustomed to, depending on what the substance is, the body will actually exhibit physical symptoms of withdrawal, of dependence. They will be in varying degrees of physical pain or discomfort, again, depending on the substance of choice. So the person that's addicted can really easily become confused. They can become confused because these physical manifestations of their addiction become really prevalent. They become the most pressing, important thing in their life because, I can't get out of bed in the morning, I'm having shakes, I'm having sweats, I'm having, GI discomfort, all of this physical stuff that's really in your face and prominent. And so it can become really easy to lose sight of the fact that it was all just an innocent attempt at a good feeling to begin with. What we see a lot of times is people come in and say, I don't have a problem, there's no underlying problem, I just need to get through the withdrawals. Once the shakes stop, that's the only thing. And that's actually a continuation of that same outside-in misunderstanding. There's no problem in here, there's no need for a good feeling. Once the shakes stop, I'll be okay, I'll be happy, I'll be at peace. And so that's when we see people get really caught up in this cycle of chronic relapse because they take measures to address the physical dependence, the shakes or the sweats or whatever the substance of choice manifests when they stop using, that gets addressed. And the underlying issue has never gotten touched. So they reach for a substance again because they're still looking for something better for in here, and they're looking out there. And so we see people come in and out of addiction over and over and over again because what they're still sitting in is this fertile soil. They are still operating and living their life as though there's something out there that's going to be responsible for the way that they're feeling in here.
You brought up a good point on the detox, and it's kind of like not doing something. Okay, so if I can only detox in that way, I'm not feeling these physical effects. Okay, then I'm going to be okay, and then the focus becomes not doing the drug, not doing the alcohol, not drinking the alcohol, and. And to the individual, it makes sense because they've gotten a little lost, okay, and they've lost. They've never become aware of the fact of the real reason why this all started in the first place. So, kind of what happens is what they're looking at chopping off this part of the plan, if you will, which this is where the behaviors. That the seen behaviors of addiction, okay, is. And so the focus becomes chopping the plant off or not using drugs. And of course, as we all know, when you do that, as long as we have fertile soil, outside in misunderstanding of where happiness comes from, and we have the firm roots that are in place, which we'll talk about in our next podcast, this will sprout right back up. And it doesn't have to be the same drug of choice. I mean, we hear about it all the time, people switching drugs of choices and people switching addictions. And so no matter what it may be for the individual, but this still sprouts back up and we're still dealing with the same issues, and it's because of that misunderstanding.
And actually, everything that we've been saying, it really reminds me of this old story that I've heard in several different versions, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but where men spent years searching for the secret of happiness, the meaning of life, and they dove to the depths of the deepest ocean, and it wasn't there. And they spent years scaling the tallest, most dangerous mountains, and they made it to the peak of the mountain, and it wasn't there. And they went deep in the deepest depths of the darkest jungles, and it wasn't there. And at some point, they asked the universe, where is the secret of happiness? Where is this meaning of life? And they said, it's hidden in the last place that you would ever think to look, which is inside yourselves. And I think that's just really a beautiful illustration of what we're talking about here today, because it's the closest thing to us. It's the most direct route to any feeling, and it's the last place that we think to look.
I love that story, you know, and that beautifully illustrates what we're talking about here. And so, yeah, you know, now we spoke a little bit about the genesis of addiction. Our next podcast, we want to talk maybe about, we could call it the roots here. And, you know, what provokes this negative feeling that we get sometimes, some of us get, that we want to change. And so that'll be our next topic. And I'd like to thank everybody for watching this. And, you know, I'd like to also recommend a book. And so since this is the genesis of addiction, I think a good place to start would be a book called The Serenity Principle, okay? And it's written by Joseph Bailey. And I think you can get a lot out of it, and it shows a different perspective on addiction.
Yeah, great book recommendation, Barnett. I've gotten a lot out of that one. And for all you guys that have been joining us today, thank you so much. It's been our pleasure to be able to spend time with you talking about this topic. Look forward to the next one. In the meantime, if you have any other questions about anything that we've discussed here today, feel free to visit our website, gulfbreezerecovery.com. And we look forward to the next time that we can speak to you about going beyond addiction.